All right, episode 49. Here we go. Before we get into it, though, let's talk about who and what company is helping making this podcast possible. Today's episode is brought to you by Onnit. Onnit. What is Onnit? Well, if you listen to the podcast, you probably heard me talk about them before. But if you haven't, I like to call them a health and fitness organization. They might call themselves a health and fitness juggernaut, dedicated to delivering total human optimization to athletes, thinkers, fitness gurus, entrepreneurs, if you fall into that boat. If you go to onnit.com, onnit.com/hot, you're going to land on the Cleared Hot landing page. So let's talk a little bit specifically. I'm getting ready, training now. I'm 1 month out, essentially, from opening day with Dudley up in Alberta, and there will be some supplements involved on that trip. Now, people might be tired of me talking about supplements in relationship to how you structure your life, but I'm going to do it every single time, because if you treat your body like crap and you eat like crap, you're largely wasting your money when it comes to supplementation, right? Focus on the macro, get the rest, recovery, training, and nutrition dialed. Then you can delve into the world where the supplements are really going to help out. So as I'm getting ready for this trip, the three things I'm looking at: one is Alpha Brain, which is a nootropic. I take it not frequently because I want to make sure that it still has the impact on me when I do take it, but it definitely helps me maintain my sharpness, my clarity, and a lot with memory. All of that stuff is going to help in a hunting environment, so that's coming for sure. Another thing that I am definitely going to be taking, and this is on the onnit.com/hot landing page, is the Total Primate Care, or TPC. They are a day and a night package, and it's got vitamins, minerals, a whole bunch of stuff in there. Instead of reading it all out, I'll just let people look at it if they want to. But that's a morning and night. That's definitely going in the hunting backpack. And the last thing that I'll probably take up there, or I know for a fact is going to be in my pack, if you go to the top under the foods tab, it's the protein bars and the protein bites. All I can say is, goddamn, those things are delicious. So those will be in the backpack as well. And that's really what I'm looking at right now as I'm training leading up to that, and then getting ready to pack my gear out here in a couple of weeks. It's going to be a heavy component of Onnit supplements. So, hit the macro, work your way towards the micro, make sure you're getting from your supplements commensurate value to the money and time that you're putting in. So dial the macro first, and when you're ready, go to onnit.com/hot and shop away. Be smart. Now, on to the episode. I'm fired up about this one. I was really looking forward to this conversation for quite some time, and I had to look at it on a calendar for at least a good month and a half to 2 months and watch it slowly creep up. But again, if you listen to the podcast, you'll realize you'll have heard me talk about that we recently moved to Montana, and last winter was our full season, our first full winter season in Montana. And of course, to set the bar at a level that may never be achieved again, we got absolutely dumped on 410 inches of snow up at the resort, which we're extremely fortunate enough to be able to see from the second story of our house. I have two young boys in the house who have a healthy disrespect for injury and fear. It makes my stomach hurt watching them do just about anything because of how hard they go. I wonder where they get it from. But this last year, we dove in deep into the snowboarding world, and I was up there every opportunity I could get, even though my first experience on a snowboard was absolutely horrendous. In 2016, my brother-in-law threw on a video, and I'm not going to get into it too much because we talk about it on the podcast, and the video was called Deeper. I'm trying to remember because there's 3 videos in the trilogy, but the subject of the video is the guest for today's episode. His name is Jeremy Jones. He is hands down a total badass. He is a pioneer, in my opinion, in not only the way that he goes after his passion and his pursuit, the way he actually executes it, the physical manifestation, but also the way he thinks about it and the way he approaches what it is that he wants to do, and looking at everything that's available and seeing things for where they limit him and seeing other opportunities that you're going to have to work really hard for, but the reward may be unbelievable. He has brothers who created Teton Gravity Research, and they make amazing films. I actually highly recommend going on to Netflix and just put in the search bar Teton Gravity Research. Every product I've ever seen come out of that company, the ones I have seen are all based in the outdoors. They're visually rich. The storytelling is awesome, and they created this trilogy of Deeper, Further, and Higher. And I'll put the link to those videos in the written description for this podcast. But for me, that is what piqued my interest in 2016 before we moved full-time to Montana. And it's been full speed ahead since then. And it was amazing to be able to meet and sit down and talk with the individual that really sparked that interest. So in addition to being a ridiculously accomplished snowboarder, Jeremy is also very passionate about climate change and impacting climate change specifically, and I'm speaking for him, so I may get this a little bit wrong, but specifically in terms of outcomes of election, looking for people that will vote in a manner that will protect the environment going forward. And I'll be the first to say, when it comes to climate change, that's a huge hole in my game and my knowledge base. As on many topics that I hear people bring up, as soon as people start screaming and yelling at each other, I essentially tune it out, which is not the right answer because I'm missing a lot, but I'm so tired of hearing people scream at full volume and not listen whatsoever that I know I've selectively missed out on a lot of this conversation. And it was his discussion, or I watched a video of him on YouTube discussing climate change, and then a post he made on his Instagram page that really got me interested in reaching out, because the snowboarding was awesome, but then seeing somebody who was passionate about the outdoors and the impact of climate change on his ability to be passionate about his activities in the outdoors, that's all I needed to see. So reached out, was able to link up. We talk about his background and where he started, where he is at now, and what he's doing, so I'm not going to dig into it. But like I said at the beginning, definitely fired up for this. Now the goal is to get him up to Montana and maybe get him on the magic carpet. I think I could show him a few things if I could get the 6 and 7-year-olds out of my way on the way up and down that magic carpet. But that remains to be seen. So until then, episode 49 with Jeremy Jones. Here you go.
Okay, I got the red smoke. Gun run! North and south! West of the smoke! West of the smoke! Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Yeah, for sure, too. The first day is brutal.
So I may have gone with an atypical approach. We were in Kodiak, Alaska in '97, full ice. I think it was one of our days off. We were doing just cold weather training. And we were off. It was either we were doing donuts in government vehicles or we were messing around with the snowmobiles that we had in the back of them. And I don't remember why my buddy had a snowboard, and I had never been on one. I had surfed casually growing up in Santa Cruz on the side of a mountain, absolutely ice, completely below me, with hard alpine boots on, and just strapped in. Immediately got turned around backwards and woke up like 5 minutes later. No helmet, just straight rear edge to the back of my head. Woke up, undid the snowboard, and just pushed it down the side of the hill and said, I will never, ever, ever try snowboarding again. And in 2016, my brother-in-law came to Montana at the house I was telling you about, and it just nuked on us. I would wipe off a table outside every night, and there'd be 6 to 8 inches of powder every night.
That's nice.
But I wasn't skiing either. I actually had kind of tossed away any snow sports. I had a little work-related injury in 2005 with some nerve damage in my left leg, and I couldn't handle the lateral stuff on the ski boots. But he came in one day, and he throws on a movie, and it was Deeper. And I'm sitting there watching this. I'm like, okay, this is pretty interesting. And then watching the climbs that you were doing, I'm like, all right, this guy is a psycho. I like him. I like where his headspace is. And the next day we went up to the resort, and I was like, all right, I'm going to try it again. So I put on a board and found the bunniest of bunny hills. It had to have been maybe 30 feet long. The hardest part was this rope cable, like tennis ball you had to hold on to. It was like ripping my arms out of the socket. Got to the top and stood up, and that time I caught my front edge, but I was going 0 miles an hour, so it was no big deal. And kind of got back into it, and then shortly thereafter, I think I might have every board in your guys' quiver.
Wow. Well, thank you. That's an honor.
But yeah, I started with the Mountain Twin, and then I got a flagship, and then my brother-in-law again was like, "Dude, check out the splitboarding thing." I'm like, "Okay, so I need to get a solution." So we got one of those things, and just I'm super scared of the backcountry because I know my knowledge base is very, very, very low. But it's been interesting. I don't have to worry about my ankle, which is nice because I feel really strapped in and I feel really stable.
Nice.
But the learning curve was steep. Those first 72 hours it's not great.
Well, and I for sure, and getting through that is brutal. But it's funny, like once you start linking turns, they call it a J curve, and once you start going up on that J curve, it's kind of, I find myself very envious of that snowboarder who's kind of like can get down a blue, and then you get into this for years where it's like you get better every run, and to the excitement of that feeling of like new experiences, new feelings, that kind of easy evolution is, now I work all year to like move the bar one little notch, where an intermediate's moving that bar every run.
It might be because you're at the top of the bar.
Right. It gets, but, and then it comes down, as we were talking, with my kids and I, it's like kind of cliche, but we're always like the best snowboarder on the mountain or skier is the one having the most fun. And it's true. I mean, these sports are there just to experience nature, have fun, and nothing is more sad than seeing like a bitter surfer or snowboarder at this really high level, and you're like, that guy's it's the saddest thing. And so we seek out, we'll run into, which by all, many people would call a gaper or whatever, and ride the lift with them, and we're like, that guy might be the best guy on the mountain today. Look, that guy was so fired up. That guy is crushing it, and it has nothing to do with how he's riding down the mountain.
I remember the first time, blue is the lowest, right? Because I started green. So that shows you my experience level of snowboarding. I remember the first time I was able to link like my toe side and heel side. I made it to the bottom without falling. I was beaming for 2 days. At the age of 39, I was just like, yes!
Totally.
And so then went home, I forced my kids to watch all the trilogy of movies. And
so to put it into context, for me to get that like adrenaline, and I'm actually, it's funny, I've learned now to I've come full circle, or I'm getting more out of simple snowboarding. But there was a point where for me to feel like that level of excitement, I'd have to be on the edge of life and death, basically. And that is kind of a dangerous deal to that's a high standard to get your kicks. And
I call it walking on a razor blade.
Yeah.
Base jumping is kind of the same way.
Totally.
Like we were talking before, the last episode I just did with Mark, we talked a lot about kind of risk and loss and dealing with that, and how because for me right now, I'm in a spot where I'm struggling with processing what's going to be next, just based off of things that have happened recently. But if you walk on a razor blade, you might not even know you're bleeding sometimes, and that's where it gets dangerous.
Right. Yeah, and it's like you think, and like some of the snowboarding I've done, or base jumping would be a great example of. It's like if you need to, that's like mainlining adrenaline, and if that's kind of like what you need to do to feel alive, Yeah, and that's not to discredit the joy. I mean, it's fun to mainline adrenaline at that level. It's just it's a dangerous game, and I've been on this quest to get more out of the mundane, and I've become a less pickier snowboarder, a less pickier surfer, and I love that. I'm like, man, to be able to go and get this like total joy and contentness in mundane waves or snow conditions or terrain is the evolution that I'm super proud of, really.
It extends your the timeline of your life too.
Yeah.
I would say it really helps you enjoy more of those moments.
Yes.
Which is I describe to people just about everything I do. I'm going for the lowest trajectory over the longest timeline, as opposed to the steepest candle that just burns out.
Right.
Although it may be bright.
Yeah.
I've never watched a YouTube video where I said, you know what, that's worth dying for.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah. Definitely.
So we have to. I'm just infinitely curious too. I want to just go back to when you started boarding because,
Yep.
like I kind of alluded to, you're at the top of the bar now in what you do. I'm sure that didn't happen overnight. So, fill me in, man. How did the journey begin?
So, so basically, grew up on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. My parents fell in love with the mountains kind of late in life, for kind of in their mid-20s, through my grandfather, who discovered Vermont. And I say that from on Cape Cod we have what we call the bridge disease, where very few people drive off of Cape Cod like that.
Reminds me of the island of Coronado in California.
Yeah. So, for example, I have about 90. I come from a huge family with about 98 immediate aunts, uncles, first cousins.
Oh, damn.
That's 12. My mother comes from 12, is one of 12. My dad is one of 4. They've all had kids. So of those 98, it's basically my brothers who started Teton Gravity Research and live in Jackson Hole, and myself, and one or two others that don't live on Cape Cod or within an hour from Cape Cod. So finding Vermont was like, where is that? My grandfather, so he found Vermont. Parents visited. They loved it. They dragged us up there. My brothers and I pretty quickly fell in love with just the freedom and the beauty and snow, and we were just like, we need to be in the mountains full time. And as soon as we could do that, we did that. And just I started out, went to my first pro snowboard, and I'm actually feel really lucky because when I started out snowboarding, there was no metal edges, there was no high backs on the bindings, super basic snowboards.
Was it just a plank of wood, basically?
It was a plank of wood. And then if you look at the timeline of snowboarding, it went from like 1983, we're on a plank of wood, and by 1987, it's allowed at my home mountain. So we started out where we had to hike everything to snowboard. We'd hike the resort after it was closed. And so by 91, we're basically in snowboards that largely resemble what we're into today. So the super short, really and it was really around like between 87 and 1990, it was like the evolution of product was through the roof.
What drove that?
What drove that is, I think people coming to snowboarding, and then it was just this, like the high back was this huge breakthrough. A metal edge was this huge breakthrough. And I guess once they figured out like that the ski construction would work on snowboards, coupled with a high back, coupled with being able to ride a lift, so you're like constantly, you're doing a year's worth of riding in one day, made this really fast, crazy trajectory. And then by 1998, it's in the Olympics. So virtually in 10 years, it went from like not allowed to be in a ski area, hard to ride down the mountain, which you experienced, to really, this massive sport with in the Olympics, right guard commercials, mainstream. So to be a part of that trajectory was, I feel, really fortunate.
So you started off just recreationally and then dove head first. I mean, obviously it's a passion of yours, but did you find that passion pretty early?
I did. It was actually my moment that you explained where you were like, I linked turns and it was the greatest thing ever. It took me forever to learn how to link turns on hard snow. So, and I remember it was evening. I had just gotten a Burton Cruiser with high backs and edges, and I thought that was going to unlock snowboarding for me. It didn't. I was at peak frustration, and I'm like, I'm ready to like trade this board in. It was just having a really tough go on it, and then I hiked up, laid it just as it was getting dark to higher than I'd been all day, and I just let the board go faster than I'd let it go, and it was almost like this hand of God, because we had nowhere. There was no one to teach us. There was no ski instructor. And I just put it on edge, made a turn, did it again, got to the bottom. I was so excited that I actually broke the binding trying to get it off to run back up the hill. And I literally, I can walk to the exact spot where I made my first toe turn and first heel turn on hard snow. And at that point, it took over my life. I was grew up really into hockey, being from Massachusetts. And everything else went away. 2 years later, did my first contest. Won the contest, continued to kind of win everything as an amateur. 2 years later, did my first pro contest, got third in that.
What was the actual contest like? What were you guys competing in? Obviously, you were on a board, but what were you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so there was racing and there was half pipe. There was no terrain parks at this point in time, and it was really the Craig Kelly era of the best snowboarder was the one who could win a race and win a half pipe contest, and everyone did everything. And by 92 we started getting specializing,
splitting between the two, you mean?
Yeah. And at 90, right around 91, 92, I did my first pro contest. I started out doing everything, but I was naturally a gifted racer. So contests were expensive to enter. It was $150 to enter a half pipe contest, $150 to enter a race. I went to the first pro contest, got third in the race, got 50th in the half pipe, which was I didn't surprise me, but I'm like, not wasting $150 on that.
Yeah, that was more confirmation you were going to
hop
ship. Yeah.
And then racing was my ticket to see the world. But along the way, when I grew up, my brothers were predominantly skiers. And it was always about riding top to bottom, nonstop, linking turns, airs, finding the little powder stashes. And that was still at the heart of it what I wanted to do. And racing was a passport to get me to Europe and get me to these places. But it was always as soon as the contest was over, it was free riding. Never took days off, because as soon as we'd have a day off after a race and I'd be up free riding, and so it was always a connection for me.
What in those early half pipe days, what do you think the reaction would be if a current day Sean White dropped in there and just ripped one of the tricks that he was doing? Would people have just put their boards and just kicked them downhill you win?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. The McTwist was a huge scenario, and the half pipes, I mean, they were hand dug.
Oh boy.
They didn't have vert. You'd have these tombstone highway hits that you'd kind of dig out, so you'd have this ditch with like chiseled jumps along the side. But it just the progression that was going on was happening contest to contest.
It's like you're saying somebody in the beginning curve of learning how to board. If you're starting at zero every day, you're like, oh wow, this is possible.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know I could do this. So when my brother-in-law turned that video on, my mind was blown. And I would say probably the comment that blew my mind the most, and I don't know if it was in deeper. It might have been, actually, I think it was. But you started talking about how the helicopter limited you
Yep.
instead of opening up the world to you. And I think that's a diametrically opposed mindset than most people have. Because they're like, oh, I get to ride in a helicopter. I don't have to hike. So it was in that moment I was like, okay, there's something here. And I knew I would appreciate your mindset. And when I left the military, I was passionate about skydiving. I had no way, I couldn't figure out how I was going to make it into a profession, though. Because loving something that's expensive is great, as long as you have a way to fund it.
Right.
When did you realize that you could turn your passion into a profession? Because the riding you were describing, the contest, if somebody throws on either deeper, further, higher, they're not going to see that type of riding, except for in a flashback.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yep.
So I guess I'd just say there's a huge gap between, it seems like, what you used to do and you now. It seems like somewhere in between there you figured out a way to turn your passion into what you do for a living.
Yeah. Like kind of when I started out, there was no team managers, and it was really, I'd say this, going from kind of a groveling pro to getting paid to make snowboard movies. That was a solid 6 to 8 years where I was, we were sleeping in cars, like camped at the helipad in Alaska, living off of very little funds and like living off of Cliff Bars.
Because they want to give you gear.
Yeah.
Skydiving's the same way. It's tough to pay a mortgage with a canopy.
Yeah. And so it was this where for a long time it was, my parents going, when are you going to college? When are you going to stop doing that? Like, this is ridiculous. You guys my brothers were in the same boat. And so I don't, I had enough money to buy my first, beater car at 20 years old. And I didn't really start making ends meet till I was probably 26 years old. And so that kind of, and it's common. I see it in life where it's like you have this passion, and to get from to make that into a full-on career, that gauntlet that you need to run.
That's a great term for it. That's a great term for it.
There's like gravestones along the way where people are like throw in the like white flag and go, man, this is just too hard. And
street signs that say "Give up now."
Yeah, and it could be a photographer. Like almost every time you look at like the dream job of someone, you're like, God, how did you do that? And it's like, well, I lived in my car for 6 years.
It's the end state of the dream job, what they see. It's
the
YouTube video. It's like base jumping on YouTube. The video starts 15 seconds before exit usually, and almost always turns off before their feet hit the ground. And you hiked for 6 hours to get that 45 seconds, but that just doesn't make the highlight reel.
Totally.
Yeah, it's I had the same journey. I knew what I loved to do, and I ended up taking those offshoots with like one eye on, I'm going to do this. I'm driving down that road, but I have to do this because I have a mortgage. I have a car payment, and then I would come back to it. And then, it was I remember kind of laughing to myself the first day I got a sponsor to skydive. I was just like, ha, 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 I fooled everyone.
Yes.
So you started... Was the kind of leap for you making snowboarding films, of which I have seen almost none, because that was more like in the DVD VHS days.
Right. Yeah. For me, my brother started a film company called Teton Gravity Research. We fell in love with snowboarding in Alaska. The dream was to go to Alaska for 4 to 6 weeks a year and make snowboard movies and use helicopters to do that. And I did that. I was super successful at it. I was in about 50 snowboard movies, which largely were based around using a helicopter, which is an incredible tool
Yep.
to make snowboard movies with. And by my last year using a helicopter, I was in 5 snowboard films.
In that 4 to 6 week season, you were able to.
Yeah, I could go in and shoot a video part, which traditionally a pro rider would spend all year to shoot one part. I could, in 3 sunny days in Alaska, I could shoot a video part. So I would just like move through these different film companies and just really, and I was like 30 years old at the time. My career was cranking, sponsors were fired up, and I had this awesome ecosystem of filmers, photographers, other riders. It was just like down to clockwork. I knew, I had a hotel room waiting for me at the key spots, and
You had a template that was dialed.
It was so dialed, but along the way, I'm like, man, the progression's not there. I felt like I was selling the wrong dream of like a dream that only 1% could do.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, I was spending probably $30,000 a year on helicopters. And a helicopter, the reality is you can only take a helicopter to about 5% of the world's mountains. And I've always enjoyed that feeling of seeing new terrain for the first time and then figuring out, finding that perfect line in these new mountain ranges, and then figuring out how to ride them. And that's when I realized that the helicopter was limiting.
Were you able? I mean, it sounds to me to be able to film a segment in 3 days. Were you looking at the terrain and studying it, and you just had that ability to know what you were going to be able to do? That's how you could just drop in and just rip that session?
Yeah, I got really good at looking at terrain, finding my line, standing on top, knowing exactly where I was, and then also understanding avalanche conditions and going in with a helicopter and learning how to assess snow conditions super fast. So we'd go in, drop a cornice, like start our day first thing. So the hard thing in Alaska, it's awesome. You get a bunch of snow, then you get sun, and then snow, and then sun. So how quickly can you go to get to movie terrain after a storm? And I figured out with my brothers at TGR, we were committed to like, how can we get onto this kind of movie terrain as fast as possible. We figured out how to we'd find a cornice to drop, which is largely what they would do at a ski area, where they put a bomb on a slope to test it, and if it slides, you figure out it's dangerous. That, and then this huge breakthrough was I figured out that the really fluted spines are actually really safe, and we could get on those really fast by skipping a ton of steps, because those really steep faces, they're constantly shedding, and you don't have, like, the most dangerous avalanche terrain is a 38-degree open bowl.
Really?
So a 55-degree fluted face, if you think of like that big open football field, that slides, that's going to kill you. You look at these fluted faces, they're all broken up, and there's not much to...
They just can't hold a lot to slide
It just can't
down.
hold that football field of snow.
Wow. When you say that you can only get to 5% of the mountains via heli, is that a limitation of the helicopter, or is that because these zones... you can only take the helicopter into certain zones?
So the helicopter limitation is 2 things. One, they can only go so far with fuel. And so you look at like a place like Alaska, it's just so massive and there's so few roads. So to like kind of have your fuel supply, so you kind of always have to keep coming back to that road. That, and then when you get to say the the lower 48 and largely most of Alaska is you're not allowed to take machines there. We have really protected wilderness.
Is it a national park boundary, or who's drawing those boundaries?
It's national park and wilderness areas.
I can see that as a good or bad, depending on whether or not you want to make a movie on it.
Well, and you can, that's and I used to, my view on that has changed.
Yeah.
When I was snowmobiling to make these movies and using helicopters, I would look at big protected chunks of terrain and be like, God, what a shame we can't take a helicopter in there.
So what was the tipping point where you're like, you know what? We're going to go on foot?
So it was multiple different things, because it was one, I felt like I was selling the wrong dream, because who's got that kind of money to go snowboarding? So I was distancing myself from those people I was standing next to in lift line. Two was I started just had this and the thing is I would hike all year, save all my travel budget just for Alaska. And I really enjoyed that experience of hiking. It is always been with me. Another factor I hated that as I was seeing these mountains change and realizing that my footprint and the resources and it got harder to justify burning that much gas to go snowboarding.
When you say change, you're just talking about what they would look like year after year, the snow.
Yeah, I was starting to really, see climate change take effect on these areas that I was snowboarding, and my snowboarding was part of that problem. And then I started having this craving to not want to go back to my hotel room at the end of the night. And it was a really big turning point for me, and it was terrifying. It was actually it's funny, the things that have kept me up more at night is not this serious mountain I'm going to snowboard, but these changes or decisions I've made in life. So the anxiety of it was very funny when I told my sponsors, I was very honest. I'm like, hey, I'm making these big changes. At that point I was 30, snowboarding. 30 years old is technically kind of that's the equivalent of 80 years old in pro snowboard years.
Your master's category.
Well, your master's, and you're kind of this is probably my last contract. And I'm like, I'm going to do this on my own way. I have this path I want to go on. All that ecosystem of filmers and photographers and riders, none of them came along with me on that. I lost some sponsors on it, which I was totally comfortable with, and I figured there'd be this small group of people that liked these films, but I largely figured I was kind of on the way out of being in the spotlight, being in magazines and stuff. So the equivalent of, with a helicopter, we'd film 8 lines a day. On foot, we were lucky to put 3 film lines down in a month of being out there.
Yeah, and I don't know if people listening to this will have an appreciation for it unless they go watch some of your films. When you say hiking or on foot,
right?
Just go. Yeah, I'll put a link to all of them. You need to go watch to get an understanding, because there's some hiking and some on foot stuff that'll make you sweat watching it. And the distances, it's not like you're talking 100 yards. You're talking miles.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because along the lines, when I had started Protect Our Winters a couple of years prior to this, which is this foundation focused on slowing down climate change. But my friends and these people I've been working with, kind of under their breath are like, wow, man, he's taking this environmental stuff really far. And they jokingly be like, how's that hippie snowboard film coming? And What they didn't realize is we're like 75 miles from the closest road, camped out underneath the biggest mountains and lines that I had ever tried to snowboard. And my goal was going, if I can figure out this foot powered stuff and how to hike these things, I now have 95% more terrain to choose from, which means the best lines of my life are ahead of me if I can figure out how to safely hike up them and ride them. I wanted to go and take that same level of action and snow quality and terrain and hike them. And it took a long time. It wasn't until 2 years in on Deeper at the end of that filming where I undoubtedly achieved that dream.
Yeah. Again, amazing film. So what year was your first foot powered?
God, so it's probably, call it 10 years ago. So around 2008, I would guess.
And when did Jones Snowboards enter into the equation? Because you obviously were
Yeah, so
using other
great,
people's stuff during
yeah.
that.
So what happened is I started splitboarding a ton.
Yeah.
And that's
How were the first splitboards?
so splitboarding had been around for kind of, it's arguable when for a while, at least since 87, maybe before that.
Oh, really? I thought it was more. I had more recent.
Yeah, maybe it was 90. I don't know the exact time, but at that time they were really heavy. The binding interface, and for your audience, basically what a splitboard is it's a snowboard that's cut down the middle, and it turns into skis, and you climb a mountain seemingly on wide cross country skis.
Yep.
You get to the top, it turns back into a snowboard. You snowboard back down.
It's a transformer.
Yes. And early on, it took a long time for it to go from uphill mode to downhill mode. It was heavy. The bindings had a lot of slop in them, but they worked. And they were starting actually in Montana. This
Really?
company, Spark R&D, came out with a new splitboard binding that made it, call it 10% better, but a key step it was the first innovation that splitboards had largely stayed exactly the same since they first came out. Spark came out with this enhancement to the interface that just made it feel that much more like a real snowboard. But we were cutting our snowboards down the middle.
I was going to ask you, I'd heard stories of people saying, yeah, basically we would just jig the thing right down the middle.
Yeah, and then in doing so, they'd get a lot softer. And so and it became where that was predominantly, it was about 80% of my snowboarding at that time. And I'm on these boards cut in half, and my sponsor's like, we will never make a split board. There's not enough market for it. Started talking to other companies. They were interested in having me ride for them, but they're like, we're not making a split board. So I decided to start Jones Snowboards, and halfway through filming Deeper, and my first split board was called Solution, and it really was this missing point to where in the past we would split board up these mountains, strap in, and be like, okay, note to self, you're on a split board, you can't ride the same way that you could ride a normal board. And then once we started putting real attention into these split boards, we got to a point where we were strapping in going, all right, these things ride just like your normal snowboard.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is split up the hill first thing in the morning before the lift is open, potentially deviate from the course that they say to come down on because there's just a more awesome course to the left. Board goes in the back of the car, grab the flagship, go hit the resort for the day, and then just pray to God I don't fall asleep on the way home. Just completely worked at the end of the day. I have super limited experience, but I have found that Solution, I can't tell the difference other than the bindings feel different because of the resort bindings I have and the what are they called? I think I'm pretty sure I just went to your website and got exactly what we got. Karakoram? Is that
Karakoram.
Karakoram, yes. Those are the ones I have. Those things are awesome.
Yeah, so that another interface. So that kind of like sparked.
So the Spark R&D, did that kind of fire off a lot of other, because it got people thinking, right?
It just got people going.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, we can like put a little bit of energy into this, and we see results. And now, fast forward to today, there's multiple different interface bindings. Karakoram being one of them, who I work with. There's a smaller company, Phantom, making cool stuff, and then. Now it's every major snowboard company makes a Splitboard, which is great. I mean, first and foremost, I'm a snowboarder that wants the best snowboard possible. So I love the fact that there's multiple different binding companies, snowboard companies. They're competitors of mine, but they collectively, we are raising the bar and then making for a better user experience, which at the heart of it, that's what I'm into.
Yeah, that's what you're there for. How has it been owning your own board company? What you thought it would be?
Owning the snowboard company it's funny. The two things I never wanted to do was make my own films.
I know where this is going.
And start my own snowboard company. And in the course of 10 months, I made the decision to do both. And the snowboards it's been a ton of fun, quite frankly. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of work, but as a snowboarder, to have total freedom to develop what I want, and the best people in the world to help me develop what I want, and then have the customer support that, and then allow me to keep developing more stuff. It's been this great honor, and the ultimate compliment for me is when I see a Jones snowboard in a lift line or at a trailhead.
I bet, yeah. I see them all over up in Big Mountain.
Yeah.
Usually on little kids that are passing me, so I try to catch up and push them over the line, which is actually what I do with my own kids, because you're talking about the learning curve. I don't understand how they pick it up so fast. I think it was maybe a morning,
yeah.
And they're just, and I just yell, slow down, don't go in the trees, or go together. Like,
yeah, it's it's funny. You said, like, I was skateboarding today with my kids, and I was watching my son, and I'm like, all right, I got like 2 weeks before he passes me up.
You have to cheat is the dad technique that I've figured out is the only way to keep him in check. So the first year that Jones Snowboards came out, was it just a split?
So we came out with 4 models: a Splitboard, the flagship,
Yep.
a Mountain Twin, and then this alternative kind of directional powder board called a Hovercraft.
Which my brother-in-law is in love with.
Nice.
Yeah, so I have a question from him since we're on boards. In your opinion, in the last decade, the greatest technological advancement or achievement in snowboarding?
I would say the really from a shape perspective. Yeah, we're getting better at using materials, but if you look at say buyer's guides over the years in snowboarding, ironically in 1987 you would have this diverse shapes, and then by 1992 every snowboard looked pretty much
relatively the same. Yeah.
And that lasted until right around 2008 was the start. And it was kind of also why I started the snowboard company, because the other, what the companies are saying is, we're not investing in new shapes and we're not investing in split boards. And they were all 98% of the energy was put towards snowboards for riding the terrain park. And because terrain park came along, it was this great boom for the sport. Terrain parks are awesome, but it's not the only dimension of snowboarding. And so I was friends with McConkey, and along when he started doing these really radical
those fat paddle skis.
Yeah, I mean, reverse camber, reverse side cut, turned ski shapes on its head. And I wanted to start bringing that into snowboards. And so that led, that was another thing that got me over the line to start Jones. And since 2008, 2010, I mean, it just continues. The last 5 years, if you look at the diversity of shapes on the market, it just really enhances the snowboard experience. And what it does is it takes, depending on what board you grab for that day, it will take your home mountain and make it into a completely different mountain. And that makes that mundane slope really fun.
Yeah, even just looking through the Jones line, like you get some of them with the, I won't call it a crazy swallowtail, but in comparison to the rounded out, you're looking at that like, I don't know if I could ride that thing.
Yeah, I mean, so my go-to powder board right now is a 147 swallowtail with full surf rocker, and I think it's 28 centimeters wide. And 4 years ago, if you said, what are the chances on you riding a board like that on the best day of the year, I'd be like, bet my house on it.
Oh, that's your go-to on the best day of the year?
Yeah, and it's just like, I would have never in a million years thought that I would have got there, but I really embrace this, like, I try to really have this open mind with product development and never crush something until I've had it on my feet. And because things, it's weird how you have these great breakthroughs, but if you follow the path, what got you to that breakthrough, it's a winding road.
Yes. Would you say a lot of your innovation comes from surfing?
A lot of them, I'd say recently, a lot has come that we've had this pretty groundbreaking for myself. If you look at what I'm snowboarding right now, hooking up with the surf shaper, Chris Christensen, and going to his shaping room and going, shape me a snowboard with the same tools that you, by hand, the same way you shape a surfboard, and let's see where that takes us.
Was he the guy from Life of Glide?
Yes.
That's why I asked that question. It's like, I surfed a little bit in Santa Cruz. I never surfed a ton, so and I've snowboarded a little bit, so there's no way I can make the comparison, but it seemed like you can almost see in the video, like, your thought process just firing off, and then the swallowtail, like a lot of different designs.
Well, what's interesting, a lot of different designs, and we have like that one, this swallowtail that's pretty radical out there deal. But if you look at what we're developing now, we're bringing pieces of that swallowtail into
the whole suite.
And we have some new stuff coming out that updating some staple products that there's some DNA from these surf shapes. So that's why, I say that for us, that we've learned some pretty critical stuff.
Wingsuits are the same way. It's the same material, largely, that the first people jumped. The cut and camber of the wing is modified, and they're messing with materials to reduce drag and ways to make inlets higher ram air but lower drag. And it's just the slow modifications, but if you take an older generation suit, and by that I mean 4 years ago, skip the generation in between and grab a new one from some of these people on the cutting edge, it looks the same, and you put it on and you're like, I feel like a fighter pilot. And from the outside, it's like, okay, my arms stop here, and it looks like a combination between a straitjacket and a prom dress, and but it's all based off of feel. And just the biggest difference from the first wingsuit I jumped, it felt mushy. And the ones I jump now, you get out, and as soon as the thing powers up, it's just, you're like, oh my goodness.
That's awesome.
And then angles. I mean, I have some suits where I could literally just fly it vertically, and you're just doing a slow corkscrew. Whereas the first suit that if I had done that, I would have been in a flat spin head at sea like Maverick without the ejection seat.
Wow.
Which is not awesome. My wife is not a fan of a term that I picked up from you called quivering. Because boxes will show up at the house, and she just looks at me and she's like, really? I'm like, well, come on. I know you got to have everything for every condition. But I love I have always been a gear nut. Like we would get issued gear. I would go immediately take it apart and move a pocket 1/4 of an inch.
Right.
Because I wanted to understand it. I'd imagine you're the same way. And so there's probably is there an upper limit on the evolution of snowboards? Or, I mean, do you think in 10 years, are you still going to be, I mean,
yeah, I think that so because we also are doing, we're on a really deep dive right now on some material stuff that's been going on for a couple of years. And so I think we'll continue. We have what we call the ode to progression.
Ode to progression?
Yes, and it's it's something like, all things can be made better either through material or design. Stagnation is not an option. And so some of the stuff, like his flagship, for example, that's a board that is this like really refined tool that I started developing at Rosignol days, which was a snowboard company I worked with before I started my own. And I was with them for 19 years, and I think I had my own boards with them for 10 years. And that board, when it comes to like riding the most serious mountain, want to go as fast as possible, stomp the biggest airs, that's the board that I grab. And so to make refinements to that board are these really small refinements, but over time those small refinements
they
add up. And then I still think with the Splitboard stuff, we'll continue to see quite a bit of progression. So I do think that, I mean, our plate is full. I mean, the amount of prototypes that we're doing right now.
Got to be ungodly.
Yeah, it's just a ton of stuff that we're working on right now, and some of it takes years. Some of them we implement it right away.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. From new idea to on a rack at a snowboard shop, I mean, I'm sure it could be quick if it was simple, but for a brand new concept idea, are you talking years?
It's funny, the like these surf shapes that we did, those happened pretty quick, where we got them on snow and we're like, never felt that before, this is amazing, let's make it. The flagship, for example, to make an improvement on that's years, because you have this really refined product with a pretty specific usage, which is really demanding, like needs to handle speed, stomp cliffs, handle all snow conditions. That's a development that we're a couple of years in on developing this new flagship.
You get to ride them all too, don't you?
I do get to. I am. That's where I say the snowboard stuff. Like, yeah, it's a lot of work, but God, it's a dream come true.
It's the passion into a profession. I wish more people could find a way to do that at the level that you have done it. There's a rewarding sense of accomplishment.
I'm very fortunate. There's no question. I mean, now that I have some perspective, I'm looking at like when I started snowboarding, like, I mean, to the day I had like the perfect birthday to come up through snowboarding. And so timing, passion, a little bit of luck.
Yeah. What do you guys do in the summer, though? Like, I watched you post a video yesterday of riding an electronic bike to a piece of snow that I would have looked at and walked away. Of course, you guys climbed it with snowboards and skis. How do you test snowboards in the summer?
Well, Mount Hood is actually pretty fun snowboarding and then depending on the year where we are with the design cycle, I will go down to Chile. And that's kind of our last chance to put final touches on the new line of snowboards, which, say, would come out a year later.
Yeah. And so you have new stuff coming out this year?
So the stuff that's shipping right now, like, our warehouse is full with the new product right now. That stuff was totally finished a year ago.
Is it on the website now?
It'll be on. We'll launch the new website August 15th.
Oh, hell yes.
Hopefully. Did you hear that, web designer?
He said August 14th, so you have one extra day. It's fascinating to me. I love the innovation and evolution. Like, I don't understand the aerodynamics enough on the wingsuit, but I intuitively can feel it. And it's like they'll launch a new one, and I'll sit there and I'll I'm like, yeah, I got to buy that. I'm going to have to feel the difference between the two. So I think it was about a year ago, maybe less. You posted a picture on Instagram coming out of the Capitol building in a suit and tie, which I assume is daily attire at Jones. Just three-piece.
Yeah.
And I had been following you before then and just loving this. I love the snowboard aspect of it, just because it's like, wow, this is a never-ending journey. But the post was, in essence, and I'll paraphrase and probably mess it up, but it was talking about climate change. And this particular post, like I was telling you before, was probably the reason that I eventually reached out to you, because the post was, you could have been writing a direct message to me. It's like, here talking about climate change, and it seemed like you were curious as to why people vote the way they did. So you talked to some people,
Right.
and it's not even on their radar.
Right.
And that was me. I honestly, as far as educational and knowledge and holes in my game, that could be one of the biggest ones right there. Not that I'm a deep student of government or understand that process, but I certainly know more about that than anything when it comes to climate change. And so I saw that, I was like, all right, that's it. I'm going to sit down and talk to this dude. Because in the first video, when I heard you talking, I think I actually heard you talking before I saw the video, because he had put it on, and I just could recognize the passion in your voice. And I've been kind of, Miles is the same way.
Right.
Other than the fact that he's obviously insane. That guy is so fired up and so passionate about folding a T-shirt, hiking a cliff. It's like he's
Totally.
Yeah, that glass of water's amazing.
Yes.
He's just, if you don't know Miles, I got to get him on at some point.
You
too.
do.
Oh my God. I don't know if I could control him is the problem.
Right.
Like no Red Bulls for 3 days.
Right.
They actually calm him down sometimes, which is bizarre given what's in it. But I love the passion, and then I started digging into it. But POW, protect our winners.
Yep.
So, and you alluded to it a little bit. You started noticing the change in the environment. Where did the seed for POW start, and then when did you fire that sucker off?
So yeah, protect our winners. Basically, in about 2005, I had the idea, and I had the idea because, just to back up, the type of snowboarding that I do requires me to have a very it's almost like when we go into the mountains, it's this intimate conversation with the mountains. You figure out, are they opening their arms? Are they saying, get out of here? What is...
You're
so
describing base jumping too. Standing
Yeah.
on the edge, and you sit there and you got to listen to the wind, and you look at the terrain and look at the conditions, and am I lining myself up for success or failure? Because the way I describe it is, the jump is optional.
Right.
Performance afterwards is mandatory.
Right.
And I would imagine it's the same thing standing on the edge of getting ready to go down a line. If you go, unless you want to unclip and hike back up, your performance on the downside of that is mandatory.
Absolutely. And then we also have, say, take Tahoe where we are, and we have different elevation of terrain. Like my favorite terrain in Tahoe is lower elevation. And so anyways, those two things of just this, like my life based around going into these mountains and interacting with snow and getting them on the perfect day. Naturally, I am on the front lines of seeing change to snow and seeing this medium changing the wrong way for me, and it's this necessary medium for me to, my life is shaped around snow. So to sit here in December and January in the rain, more than which is the new normal now, that's heartbreaking. And then that's coupled with, so naturally I start talking to scientists about it, I start reading about it, and I'm like, wow, the climate is changing, and we humans are the large cause of that. And so here I am. At that point, I had my name on a bunch of different products, and I'm like, hey, let's come together as an industry and do it, I wanted to raise money to slow down climate change. So talked to my buddy in the environmental field, and I'm like, hey, I want to start taking a percentage of my royalties off my pro models, send it to a group that's really focused on climate change. Where do I send the check? He comes back a week later and he's like, you need to start an organization. I can tell you where to send some checks, but like you guys as a group are not doing anything. You should be a leader on this subject. And I hated that answer, and I sat with it for a year, but I knew he was right. I tried to talk myself out of it, and then the tipping point, I guess, for me was, the main thing why I tried to talk myself out of it. One, I barely graduated high school. Two, at that point, I had an enormous carbon footprint. And I just I'm like, who am I to like take on this stuff? But the tipping point for me was I was in northern British Columbia, and it was February, and I was with some locals who were early 30s, and we were hiking their home ski resort, and it was grass, and they were walking and they're showing me their warming hut and the different where they learned how to do their tricks and and I was like, well, why is the mountain closed? And they're like, we just don't get snow here anymore. And it wouldn't have had the impact if they were 70 years old, but I'm like, wow, these guys are 30 and they've lost their mountain. And this was coinciding with, I was spending a lot of time in Europe, and amongst the glaciers in Chamonix, they've been around them, and people going like, wow, these glaciers are moving fast. Going to Alaska, watching these glaciers change really fast, which glaciers do change. They're not supposed to change that fast. Coupled with losing the low elevation spots here. And I have this thought, I'm like, well, wow, man, if that happened to them, like, thank God that's not happening in my hometown. I'm good, but that's a bummer for you guys. And
all right, so get the plane ticket to somewhere else next year.
Yeah, so anyways, I'm like, you got to do it. And the haters are going to hate, and from the start, my motto was, together we can protect our winners. And I really, like when we would run ads and stuff, I would have it of other athletes. When I went out for companies to be a part of it, I really looked for companies that I didn't work with. I did not want it to be a Jeremy Jones Foundation. And then I seeked out the best people on climate, the best scientists. And I had this motto of like, it never, don't be afraid to ask. And I started asking the best people, and they were like, this is awesome, I'm in. And and then also put it out there. I need help. Who knows how to do a website? And I'm like, either people rally around it and we have something, and if they don't, it's not going to go anywhere. And sure enough, we had a lawyer come in, help with getting our application, a website designer, so on and so forth. And we just celebrated our 10th year.
Is that with the big day for POW? You were saying it's a big day for POW today?
So this is open up a different can of worms, but today we just launched the Protect Our Winners Action Fund, which so traditional nonprofit is a 501(c)(3), and we are now we still have that, but we have this new arm of Protect Our Winners, which is a C4, and what that allows us to do is really take the gloves off and roll up our sleeves on specific political races and back candidates.
You need to borrow any body armor? So how was the response when you first started it? Because I have a ton of questions on climate change. What was your response when you first started? Were people, not necessarily people hearing about the concept, but the people you were approaching to talk about climate change, were they responsive, or they're just like, yeah, get out of here, it doesn't matter, it snows here all the time?
No, in general, I mean, it's like you can't find someone that is a professional skier or mountain guide that isn't like, yeah, I'm seeing changes.
How about people who live in cities?
Well, cities, but again, if you look at the numbers, and I don't need to, you know, if we can activate the existing community, we have all the numbers we need. So it's why I don't spend time on the far right on climate. Like we feel like, and the numbers show, like we're fighting to move the needle 2% in key areas, and so our goal is to get people off the sidelines. It's not an effective use of resources to try and go in and tell this staunch climate denier, if every college in the world, every scientist in the world can't get them on board with climate, that the climate's changing and humans are changing it, I don't have the magic words. I'm not putting energy towards that.
Some people still think the world is flat, and it's 2018.
Yeah, the flat earthers.
I'm just saying there's always going to be that group of people that it's like, hey, man, here's every piece of data. Here's every piece of math. And they go, no, I don't believe you.
Right.
Move on to the next.
Yes.
So trying to move at 2%, what would a 2% shift, or I guess I should go backwards.
Well, yeah. So first of all, when I started it, it was actually way less polarizing than it is now. So by and large, like, yeah, that's cool, man. Love it. And we were talking about changing light bulbs and reusable water bottles and reducing your personal carbon footprint, which we still talk about, still super important. But pretty quickly, as we surround ourselves with these experts, it became clear that to make large CO2 reduction, we need to do it on our whole infrastructure needs to change, and we have to do it on a national and an international level. And then so that ends up getting you into politics. And when we started out into the first trip we went to politics, you had McCain running for office talking about climate change, a Republican. Mm-hmm. There was a bill for a carbon tax that had passed the House, and we went there to try and get it, to specifically target Republican senators on it, and it was a very it was not a toxic, polarizing conversation at that time. That greatly has changed, and now it's this we know where it's gone now. With
what do you think changed that?
It's pretty clear. A couple things. Citizen United, which is this, which allows big corporate companies to donate unlimited funds to campaigns.
But they wouldn't want anything in return, though. That's just charity.
Totally. The fossil fuel industry, who has been following it, right? You can follow them and really closely. And as the science in this way, they saw that it was like a marquee Waxman bill. I forget what it was that was in. Had passed the House, but that was kind of a shot across their bow. And then they really ramped up their climate denial tactics, and they're very good at it.
Do they deny that the climate is changing, or is there denial that humans are what is changing the climate?
So they're really what they do, and it's actually it's the same people. And it's the same playbook that the tobacco industry used, which they realized that their job wasn't to prove that cigarettes didn't cause cancer. Their job was to prove that cigarettes might not have caused cancer. And that might. And so what the fossil fuel industry is, they recognize that if we just have this, bring this might that humans may not have anything to do with it, that slows things enough where they can keep business as usual cranking away, which is burning mass amounts of fossil fuels.
Your answer might be anecdotal, but from what you've seen, as far as the science, like people who obviously study this stuff,
Right.
what's the percentage of people that are behind your stance versus the Citizen United lobbying campaign? Is it? I mean, I would imagine that, and this is a guess. I would imagine that more of the science is on the trajectory or your path than it is on the defense or trying to create that wedge or opening the door for maybe not.
Yeah, I mean it's you can't find a peer-reviewed science paper on that humans aren't causing climate change. You can't find a climate denier paper that's not linked back to the fossil fuel industry.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, to put it into perspective, 98% of scientists, are on board with humans are causing the climate to warm. It's like 97% are on board that the earth is not flat. I mean, or that cigarettes don't cause cancer. I mean,
Yeah.
it is, you're talking about, there is not a single university in the world that doesn't teach this stuff. There is no debate. It is,
So what's your response, or what do you encounter when you go and talk to politicians about this stuff? Who, some may take money from those and some may not. I would imagine your response is probably different depending on who they take funds from. But I would just imagine that I have limited exposure and experience with politicians in and of themselves by choice.
Yep.
I would find it to probably be an extremely frustrating experience. I'm curious as to what yours has been.
yeah, so we go, when we go to, I've been to Capitol Hill 3 times since this last election, because that was a real, from an environmental perspective, it was like a nuclear bomb went and blew up, 30 years of work. And I basically had to decide, am I moving to Canada and going in a cabin? Or am I going to roll up my sleeves and take this thing head on? So we go to, in those trips, we go and meet pretty much exclusively with Republicans. And we try and find Republicans in mountain areas that we think that we can try and move them on climate. And
How many of them have you found to really be educated on the topic beyond a talking point?
So just to, and mind you, when you say who takes what, fossil fuel money, I hate the single biggest thing that is keeping us from going all in on these solutions is that it's become a political issue.
Mm-hmm.
It breaks my heart that it's a political issue. So I just want to, because we are in the trenches on this political battle, and if I had known that when I started, I mean, it was the last thing that I wanted to do was going to Capitol Hill or having these political battles and having it tied up to this, it's like 2 sports teams, the red and the blue. We're seeing it with every issue. It breaks my heart that it is. But Republican Party is soaked in fossil fuel money. This last election, 165 people spent $900 million keeping us on fossil fuels.
Wow.
And not only do they spend, they're very effective. I have to really. They make that $900 million go really far because they terrify, the Republican Party. If they come out on climate change, they know come to their primary, they're going to have another Republican that is going to blow the doors off that guy. So yeah, I forget what your question was.
Well, you said the Republican Party is...
Oh, the science. Sorry.
The science.
So here's what we're up. My congressman who was up for re-election, we go in there and there's no tension in the room. We try and find common ground. We know what we're up against. We're not. But so my congressman is 0 for 187 on environmental votes.
Strong. At least he's trending.
Yeah, well, he's consistent, he is not a flip-flopper.
At least he's not like 90-91. My God.
I'm like,
you know what you're getting.
You know what you're getting. And he's, but so we go in and we ask him about, I'd love to hear more about your science. You're here in Capitol Hill. You're access to the best scientists in the world. Like, please, tell me why I, should not, like, we'll close down, protect our winters. Climate change isn't happening. And, the first meeting I went in there, his head aide cited kindergarten when he learned about fossil fuels. The second time I went in and met with him directly, I'm pretty sure he was quoting the Bible saying, on the seventh day, the earth flooded and Noah built his ark, which, so that's kind of the stuff that we're up against.
I'm going to describe that as an uphill battle. Wow. So how many people do you have in the trenches with you? Because there's no way you're doing this by yourself.
Specifically at Protect Our Winters?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or even branched out. I mean, how far have you been able to grow it in as long as
you've had it? For example, since this last election, we were 3. Now we're 11. We basically have taken... Because the thing is... there is urgency. These next 2 elections are critical. So at Protect Our Winters, we've just put every ounce of reserves, anything that we have, into everything we have.
So you're talking, when you say the next 2, are you talking the midterm, then the next presidential?
Yes. If we don't, it's just, it's an all hands on deck moment, or as what we would say in the mountains, it's a no-fall zone.
Same term in base jumping too. Hey, you see to your left? That's 3,000 feet. Don't fall. Hold on to the rope if you want to.
So, so we have that, and then collectively, I guess the thing that has gotten us, say, an audience, not at this current White House, but in the last White House, they really recognize the work we were doing, because when we get everyone in Protect Our Winters behind it, we reach about 12 million people on social media. So that's a big number on an avenue that's hard to, for politicians, traditional environmental groups to have an impact on.
When you say it's like an all hands on deck, if unchecked, what does the science say we're headed towards?
Well, best case scenario, we're headed towards, you could best, like in a dream deal, and there's an outside chance would be 1.5 Celsius. But really best case is 2 degrees Celsius warming that are in the books. Per
year?
No, in the next 50 years.
Okay.
So that's 6 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
Significant. Unchecked, and that's right where scientists feel that we can adapt and evolve and learn. That's still gonna, Trump's golf course is gonna be underwater. There's still major disruption of people. There's areas where millions of people are going to be moved.
We could make an attempt to pace it, though.
And we can make we can handle that. Unchecked, we just stay on business as usual right now. I mean, you're talking about how long will human beings be on Earth? Is it 100 years? Is it 200 years? And there's debate on that. I mean, it'll be the end of, because if you start getting to 4 degrees, all these triggers start going, and then you have this runaway climate change that there's really no end in the warming, and I don't know what that. It's something, like a 4 or a 6 degrees Celsius increase that we shut down as a human race.
That's enough to keep you up at night.
Yeah. As one climate scientist said, to go into military terms, and by the way, the Pentagon, through all this, is totally on board on
No
climate.
kidding.
100%. I mean,
How did you guys end up interfacing with them? I would have never thought that would have been a touch point.
so after the election, I wrote this this email kind of note to like the main people at Protect Our Winners, which is basically kind of like a brain dump. I love to write, and in it, I'm like, we need to get the Republicans on board. We got to find one, and then we'll find two, and da 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 da. But it ended up being published by TGR, and I got a note that day from a Republican in the Pentagon going, we are, there's more Republicans than you think that want action on climate. And then the Pentagon continues to release public reports on climate change. There's a big report on Guam, where the Pentagon is going, we may, this base is in jeopardy. We're in jeopardy of losing this key strategic base.
Yeah, I've been to that base.
In the next 50 years. The drinking water is a big problem. As the sea level's rising, as salt water is going into their drinking water.
I would have, if you'd have given me 100 guesses of organizations that you would have support from, the Pentagon would not have made that list.
There's major flooding at one of the East Coast bases that you may have been on.
It depends on where it is, but I mean, yeah,
it's in Virginia or something, somewhere in that deal. But sunny day flooding.
Oh, I know. I know the area. What is it? It's not Virginia Beach. It's the Newport News area. There's a huge naval base there. The East Coast teams are there in Little Creek, and then.
So they're like that base. They recognize that base. They're losing that base.
Yeah.
The big thing why they recognize it as a military threat, because in India and that part of the world, there's a ton of people that are living where sea level rise is going to move millions of people.
Going to displace them.
It's coming at 2 degrees Celsius. Those people are going to be underwater. We know that's coming. We know these people are going to be displaced. So the Pentagon looks at mass displacement of people as that's going to disrupt things.
So the most common thing I personally hear when it comes to climate change, and I think this is, I don't want to say an excuse for people, but I think it's a wedge to basically let them take a sidestep and avoid the issue. So I'm curious as to what the scientists say that you deal with. And it goes along lines of, well, that's great. We can do anything we want to here in the U.S., but if the rest of the world doesn't get on board with what we're doing, what's the point anyway? So it's almost like this doomsday thing, right? Like,
totally.
What's the matter? Because look at China. You know?
So this is the China question used to terrify me 8 years ago because they're right. But if you look at China, who is totally embraced the issue, number one manufacturer of electric cars. If you go for China to get a license plate, it costs $10,000. If it's an electric,
what?
Yeah, because they don't want cars on the road.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Yep. So it's
they're rewarding
to get your car on the road is a $10,000 deal. Electric car, they waive the price. So they are putting wind into the sales on electric cars, becoming the number one producer of electric cars. Renewable energy. They put on more renewable energy online than in 1 year than the U.S. has in the last 10 years. So they are operating at this incredibly fast transition, and for sure, don't get me wrong, they still are burning a ton of fossil fuels and what have you, and at the heart of it, though, this is where things really get sad for me, is China recognizes it as as an opportunity, a business opportunity. It's coming. I mean, we're down to the fossil fuels that we need to get to now. They're hard to get to, which means you have more oil spills, more, it costs more to get it. It's a fact we will run out of fossil fuels. China sees this change, this change from fossil fuels to renewables represents a huge opportunity for jobs. Already in the U.S., it's some, I don't know the exact number, but significantly more jobs in the renewable sector than the fossil fuel industry today. So they recognize that it's opportunity, and that's where it gets heartbreaking. If you go back to America, like we have been this forward thinking, on the forefront, new ideas, technology, leader of the world. And then we currently are like, hold on, we are going to dig in on the past, and we are going to do everything we can to resist change. And it's and so we're getting passed up by the rest of the world.
I heard somebody say one time, in juxtaposing U.S. mentality versus even Asian culture, but China specifically, they do a good job of forecasting generationally.
You're right.
And we are like, hey, look at what's 2 feet in front of my face. And what you're describing sounds exactly like that.
And then to go also, so then you go to India, another like great.
That's the other place that people will throw at you. Like, what about India?
Totally.
Yeah.
So what's going on? So the Paris Agreement, for example, in that is there's significant money to help India forego fossil fuels and get them onto renewables. And so that, by pulling out of the Paris Agreement, that significantly changes India's power infrastructure moving forward.
Yeah, because we're removing their ability to put it in place via the economics, right?
Totally. So again, to put wind in the sail of renewables, and so that's where that Paris Agreement, not perfect, but a huge step in the right direction. And for the U.S. to pull out of that puts us, the only other country in the world is Syria.
It's a destination location. I don't know if you've been.
Have you? A great country. I mean, no disrespect to the Syrians, but not known for, cutting
I don't think
edge,
they have a lot of boarding either.
Yeah, not.
Is there any good boarding in China?
There definitely is.
Have you been?
No, but it's a huge. I'd say it represents some of the biggest unknown, unexplored mountains in the world.
2019 plans?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, China's on the radar. Mainly to. So what's happening in China is they have this whole new middle class, which is great, but they're trying to. They now have time and money, and it's really important what we call Eco 101, which is going to them and saying, hey, going to these beautiful, you have some of the most beautiful wilderness areas in the world, and going there and spending time there is very fulfilling. And this incredible, and you can see it in Yosemite, it's filled with Chinese. So trying to get them on board with, like, you have incredible wilderness and you need to protect it.
I've been to China one time I passed through, but another time I was there. Putting solar up when I couldn't even see across the street. It was bad. But also in China, I've seen pictures from Miles, the mountains that he's been there based. I'm like, are you kidding me? It looks like Avatar.
Yeah.
Some of the most unbelievable, spectacular scenery I've ever seen. That's funny you point out all the Chinese people at Yellowstone Yosemite. It's totally true too. I didn't put those two together. They actually have better stuff in their own backyard. Is there a tipping point that can't be recovered from based off the scientists you work with? Like if it hits a certain point, regardless of what human beings do, other than probably killing half of us.
Yeah, and I don't have that. That number varies, but yeah, I think like right around that 4 to 6 degrees Celsius increase is this tipping point, and
from there it's
yeah. So and I was talking to a climate scientist, and he's like, to go back to this military term, he's like, it's as if we have all these these tanks and aircraft carriers and stuff like rolling into our border and off the coast, and we're all rolling around and not seeing them. Meaning like there is a war coming, and which is this changing of the climate, and we're walking around going, everything's perfect and there's no risk out there.
Yeah, that's not a very safe environment to be in from a military perspective, for sure. So POW's mission statement is 2% change, 2% improvement.
Well, our mission. So right now, what we have going right now, when I say 2%, I mean we're coming into these midterm elections. We are focused on battleground states where we have a large footprint of people, and where the elections are going to be tight. And if we can, and why that is important, for example, we drilling off the coast of California, Arctic, up in the Arctic, that Congress approved that. How many votes? The difference on that vote is about 4 votes.
Yeah.
So if we can change those 4 votes, you're talking about actually like a pretty significant change to the direction our country's taking.
And you mentioned earlier, you're saying that the Republican Party is pretty steeped in, let's call it oil and gas money,
Yeah.
or fossil fuels. Do you see any of that on the left side of the aisle as well? Do they do a good job spreading their tentacles across both, or is it pretty cut and dry across the parties?
It's, to me, my understanding is it's cut and dry. We have no, there's not just watching really close to like who's approving Keystone XLs and stuff. There's not a Democrat out there that's approving that.
They're voting pretty much just rank and file.
Yeah, yeah.
So since you've been paying attention to climate change, since at first the alarm bells went off for you, what's the most effective rebuttal that you've heard? The problem, or the question that, or the statement that you've had the hardest time addressing?
Well, I think there's this. It's really hard to like come and like cite some science or what. Like I don't really. There's just nothing that's gonna, win the science. You get scientists on board. You want to like make that a debate in science. I'll listen.
Yeah.
But as soon as if you think of it, and you think of these Republicans, that many of them went to these great universities and they use it as a credential to get into office. Well, they contradict. They have extreme contradiction to the colleges that they're using to say, look how smart I am. I went to Harvard. Well, you clearly failed the science class.
Or you got a huge check stroke to you.
Right, and I guess the thing that bothers me about the Republican Party is just call a spade a spade. You go in and talk to a Texas Republican and go, hey, and he says, hey, you know what? The fossil fuel industry is huge in my district, in my state. It employs X amount, brings this much economy. How can I not support that? I'm going to get killed. That is a valid discussion. West Virginia, these coal mines are killing us. It's killing our jobs. Valid discussion.
Yeah.
But going and like pulling like unicorns out of the sky and like making up fake science to defend that, we're gotta get past that.
It's a valid discussion in the terms of their reelection cycle. it becomes a less valid discussion when you think generationally or the impact
Right.
that it could have. I get their desire to be in that seat, but wouldn't it? I don't know. This is where I struggle too when people take that myopic. They look at a calendar and all they can see is the date on it instead of
Right.
realizing that there's multiple pages and multiple dates. I would like
Yeah.
for my kids to be able to board for the rest of their
Right.
life, even though their skill level disgusts me after one afternoon. I mean, it's tough. So I'm totally on the outside. You're in the trenches.
Right.
I'm aware that there's a trenches. I'm not even like looking into them with binos, but it's tough because I constantly encounter arguing and yelling and just yes, no,
Yeah.
yes, no, and there's like nothing in between. You got 1%, 1%, 98%.
Right.
It's like the Grand Canyon between the two, and there's just mortars. And so I end up I shut it off, which I know is the wrong approach. But that's
I think it's important to be. I mean, you need to. It is important to take breaks from the stuff. I mean, you can't. For me, I've really had to learn that, and it's just there's too much. Like there, and have real filters on when how much news I consume, where it comes from, and just not. At the end of the day, we talked about it. I mean, you fought hard for this country to have these freedoms. And America right now, we have issues. But let's make no mistake about it. One, if you're born in America, you have hit the lucky gene pool club. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity to this day in America. There's a lot of great things to point to. If you, as far as being born today on this planet, we may look back and go, that was the golden era of humanity. So let's not walk around and like we have some major problems, and to the fact that we have it better than any other. Today is a better time to be alive than any other time, and we're in this largely this great peace. Life expectancy is way up from what it used to be. There's more clean drinking water than ever before. There's less starvation than ever before. You have God bless the technology of new hips, knees, and
man, my dad wouldn't be walking around.
Yeah, I'm out in the mountains, like crushing mountains with people with new hips and knees, and I'm a 43-year-old pro athlete, and in 80 years ago, I'd be on kind of live past 43. But with that. We have this great time to be alive, and you have to celebrate it. And that, again, go back to what you fought for. And it's a disservice not to go out every day and drink up some form of life and have that joy and love of life. But it's a shame if we have this golden ticket, and I equate it to like we've been on this. We've been at this great dinner party, and it's just been so much fun, and it's a pool party, and it's all this, and the check's coming, and we're basically like, all right, sneak out the back door, and you hand the check to the kids.
Dine and ditch.
Totally. And I can't hand that check to the kids. We are setting them, we're handing this baton to them that is not as good as when we got it, and that breaks my heart.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny when people ask me all the time about freedom.
Right.
One question I get all the time is the NFL kneeling, right? Yep. Because people immediately associate the flag with the military, even though I'm relatively sure it's owned by all of us in the U.S.,
right.
Not just the 0.05% in the military. And I'm honest with them with my answer, and because they ask me if it pisses me off, and I say, no, it doesn't. To me, what is unsettling or upsetting is not somebody exercising their freedom. It's somebody having all the freedom in the world and doing nothing with it. I'd rather have somebody kneel, like they must come out and stand. Wrong answer in my book. That is not what this country's founded on. Do I like it? No. Do I agree with it? No. Could it be construed as disrespectful? Sure, depending on which way you look. Do I want to live in a world where they don't have that choice? No. So it's not.
That's a beautiful answer. How do you think that stacks up amongst the rest of the military?
I would say I am in the minority.
Right.
Most of the military leans pretty far to the right. I mean, it's a self-selecting career path. Not that I am the most objective person in the world by any stretch, but I think I've become more so as I've gotten older. I'm 40 on the outside, and I think I'm about 98 on the inside as far as what my body feels like when I wake up. But a lot of the younger guys get very emotional about it because, I mean, I carried a flag with me on every target I've ever been on. It was underneath my body armor or in my backpack.
Really?
It means a lot. And the last time I've seen far too many of my friends is in coffins draped in a flag. And there's, Facebook. I need to give the grid coordinates for that place for a nuclear strike. But it's neither here nor there. I just wish people were, they would have a conversation like you and I are as opposed to, fuck you, and that's all they say.
Recognize the source of their news.
Oh, God. No, if it's on the internet, it's true. You didn't know that?
Right, totally.
But the young guys, internally there's some Facebook pages that are for SEAL-specific secret groups or whatever they are, and this stuff will come up, and it's mostly just like, F you, coward, this, that, or the other, and it's like, guys, you're losing the forest for the trees. You don't, that's the point. Freedom of speech is not whether or not I like what you're saying. It's the fact that you can get to say it.
Right.
And instead of yelling at the people for taking a knee, maybe just take a moment to understand their perspective or look at it from their perspective and see what they're trying to achieve. Now, a lot of the pro athletes, I would say, maybe have a thinner understanding of what they're protesting, what they're trying to achieve, but that's still their right.
Right.
And I would be more than happy to, people are like, I wish I could go on the field and kick them in the face. It's like, first off, he might look like 3 inches tall on your TV. That man's 7'3" and 400 pounds. He will beat your ass. Second off, you'd be better off having a conversation with the person.
And, that goes back to when we go and visit these Republicans is I actually, if I'm going to dinner and there's a guy with a Trump hat on, I want to sit next to him and not to try and get him to take the Trump hat off. I want to get him talking and just try to understand their perspective. And I think it's really important to, there's this great, and To Kill a Mockingbird, which is probably the first book that I ever read, where there's a line where it says, you don't know a man until you've walked a mile in his shoes. And you really got to understand, and that's the thing with the climate deniers. I totally understand, and it goes back to why it's really sad that it's this political issue because, you're on the right. My dad grew up Republican. He likes small business or small government, low taxes. You're not the worst human being in the world to feel that way. But it's, so having these conversations to understand what creates these views, and then you understand, I was driving back, I was just with this guy who was telling me, this polar explorer, Eric Larson, and he was telling me about how he thinks he's the last person to walk to the North Pole because he basically had to swim to it.
Basically, it's untenable.
And it was the last person to walk to it in summer. And he's like, we pretty much had to swim to it. And I'm driving home and I'm listening to Rush Limbaugh because I want to understand what's creating these climate deniers. And he gives this very powerful talk on how the Arctic is not shrinking; it's actually growing. The satellite images are all a hoax, and and the planet's getting colder, and it's all this conspiracy, and I mean, he is nailing it. It's like this 9-minute thing, and I'm like, oh, sweet, this is great. I can just move on with my life and get over all this protect our winters stuff. And
You're getting woke.
yeah, and then I'm like, oh shit, I just talked to the guy who had to swim to the North Pole. And so, but my point is, yeah, someone relates to it and likes Rush Limbaugh, and then they start eating up that side of things, and that's where at Protect Our Winters we really were a single issue voting deal. We want Republicans. We want you to be able to have your stance on other parts of life, but we feel like we should all agree on climate, and that's what we're focused on. No one has ever not been elected because of their stance on climate change. We hope to change that because we think once that changes, everything will happen. And to equate it to the cigarette industry, there was a long time where politicians' stance on cigarettes didn't matter if they were getting elected or not. And eventually, all it takes is one guy to lose a seat over his stance on something, and you'll start to see real change.
They used to have ads with doctors smoking. My doctor prefers Marlboros. I would love to see that ad in the modern day. Like,
yes.
Let's get that medical license and revoke it. What's the end state for people like Rush Limbaugh? So saying all of that's a hoax. Like, I don't understand the end state. Are they just trying to maintain the flow of money in the industries that are entrenched in the...
Yeah, I mean, Rush Limbaugh's given talks at the Heartland Institute, which is this incredibly effective climate denier group funded by the Koch brothers. So again, he's swimming in fossil fuel.
It comes back to money.
It just comes back to money, and money is... money effectively spent. When we say money, I mean, you go to the Heartland Institute. They, they're hitting climate change at every level. I think it was last year, they sent out 245,000 lesson plans to different schools around the country to change the way they teach science and to get that climate change may not be human caused into the curriculum. So they control the scientific or the curriculum in our schools' science classes.
Is there a organization on the other side that's trying to counter that?
I mean, we work with a group called ACE that does that, but just the funding on that, right now we are, we're little hummingbirds fighting dragons, and you can win, but we need lots of hummingbirds, and we just don't have enough of them right now.
Which is a perfect segue into my next question. For me, I mean, this is the longest conversation I've ever had about climate change, for sure. No, which is good, and I know I'm not the only person in that boat. What would you point to as a portal or a reference or an objective starting point that is not tainted by money on either side, where people can gather their own information? Where would you point people who... Because I think I'm more in the norm than the anomaly when it comes to my knowledge being super low.
I mean, there is, peer-reviewed science. I mean, you really want to peel back the layer. Just look at peer-reviewed science on climate change. And
do you have any go-to websites?
I can give you some websites off. And what I don't want to do is just hand you these I want to hand you websites that maybe come as far from the right as possible.
Yep.
Because I think that's the key to that is to not just be like, here's far left media, like follow grist.com for your climate. That's this, that's just, you're going to get turned off on a million different reasons for, on the vegetarian article or what have you. It's, so I think it's important. I think it's super important to understand where your news comes from, and there's different. Vox had this really good infograph, and it has, on one end of the spectrum is far right clickbait, far left clickbait, and then, you kind of get into the middle. And I like reading right wing news, left wing news, center news. But you got to know when you're on a certain website, like, oh yeah, these guys are far left. They're always going to push stuff drag it to the left. These guys are going to drag stuff to the right. But just understand who's behind creating that news.
Yeah, if you're reading an article that's from The Onion, don't take it as a documentary or a nonfiction, which I actually know a few people that maybe they were, I don't know, a few cocktails deep. I'm like, look at this. I'm like, oh, man.
And by and large, just to get past the Facebook, I'd say that's been probably the worst trend of like this Facebook clickbait news that starts from a blog post with a bunch of maybes and reportedlies and things like that turn into like bulletproof news.
It's amazing the rocket fuel some of those things get.
That's the
put
really
underneath them.
sickening stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing, whether you're Fox or CNBC, but there's just a whole nother level of fake news going on at Facebook that's kind of a non-starter for me. If you start reciting these like conspiracy Facebook stuff, it's like, dude, I can't. Sorry, dude, I can't go there. I hate
I'm
it.
out. There's not enough time in the day to go down those rabbit holes. I wish actually more people would realize that there's better things to do.
And mind you, to be clear, they're on both sides of the aisle on that.
That's an important point. I think it's happening on both sides, and it's the people on the far extremes of both sides that I think are taking up most of the bandwidth.
Yep.
Everybody else is like the delicious filling of an Oreo sandwiched between the two of them. So how can people, if they wanted to, find out more about POW and support POW?
Yeah, so we're protectourwinners.org. Very active, on our Instagrams and Facebook and Twitters of constantly, simple to drive you to the latest news. We have a pretty robust voter guide going in, and where you can really understand the candidate's stance on climate, stance on the environment. And to be clear, nothing would make me happier than, and this will like cause a lot of environmentalists to maybe throw up, but
Perfect.
Yeah. I think I can step down from. I actually like this news about this Action Fund. I'm the chair of this board, which means I am really rolling my sleeves and getting deep on the climate front. But I will resign from that, being the chair of that board, and go live in my cabin and go quietly when we have a Republican president that is a champion on climate. To me, that represents that we are now, as a country, working together to embrace this, the challenge of our lifetime, and we're, as a complete country, putting all our resources towards it. And I think we can look at when we've done that as a country, we have done phenomenal things. And I guess the most recent or the grandest example would be, your Normandy, to go back to like a military reference of, really, what the birth of this country, which is a bunch of farmers coming together to fight this big empire. So collectively, the United States can do, we can't be stopped. And I think that, ironically, or one of the best examples would be why a Republican climate champion in office just shows me that it's no longer a political issue at that point.
I would agree. Are you hopeful, or are you concerned that you'll see that in your lifetime?
I think I'll see it. The truth always wins. It's getting way harder. I should say, when we go in and talk to these Republicans, it's very much now it's behind closed doors. No cameras. They are, which is, here you have this like what science is telling us is the biggest challenge facing humanity moving forward. And you can't even get them to go on record on their science.
Wow,
and
that's an indication of how scared they are.
yeah. So, and again, to put myself in their shoes,
I get it. Yep, I do too.
they want to keep their job, and which I think is the problem with our politicians is we have too many. We don't have leaders saying and bringing new ideas and educating. Like, I know you've never heard of this, or our climate tax is terrifying, but give me an opportunity to explain why I'm all in on a climate tax and this is good for America. But yeah, so I get what creates the climate denier. I understand why that Republican. But they're in a tricky situation, and I think, that hopefully these next two elections, I think, are going to be tight. I think it's going to be a dogfight, but I think, maybe in two presidential elections from now, the debate will be on what the best moves are forward to tackle climate change, and like, let's have debates on the solutions. Is it microgrids? Is it this? Is it, what? That's what we should be debating right now, because we don't have all the answers, but we're stuck. And quite frankly, we're not even debating climate. I mean, in this last election, there was I think the word climate change on these, these presidential debates was probably mentioned a handful of times, and that's because right now it's somewhere it lies in between a number 8 and number 12 issue of importance for voters.
That was in the post you made too, that original one.
And until we get that into a top 3 issue, the candidates their feet aren't going to be put to the fire on their stance. They can really just brush through that, and we kind of need to, or we absolutely need to move that up the list of importance.
Do you find, watching you from a distance, it seems like about once a year you just go charging somewhere. Do you find that to be a pretty good refresh, and you can get an appreciation for what it is you're in the trenches for?
Yeah, it's funny. We have this kind of joke that we've always had where, we say, I like to say I'm a devout member of the Church of the 7-Day Recreationalist. And it's, as this last election, everything went sideways. My buddies and I were talking. We're like, dude, the Church of the 7-Day Recreationalist is actually like super important. Because without that, we would be an unglued mess if we didn't have this daily interaction with nature. And so, yeah, the importance of that has only risen, and I think it's also part of why my standards of snow quality or wave quality has gone way down, because I'm just kind of in the trenches a little bit with the climate stuff, and then you put me out in the ocean watching a sunset, and it's just like, oh my God, this is just the best thing in the world. Thank you. I am so happy now.
And then your energy bar is full, and you can come back and get back in the trenches.
Yeah, and it just puts importance on again, like, why we need passions in our life, and and I think looking at kids, like, we need to, in our schools, there's very little talk about how to have a fulfilled and happy life. It's all about getting into the best college and making as much money as possible at the expense of everything else.
I have, so my oldest is going to be a freshman, then I have an 8th grader, and my daughter is 10 going on about 40. He's going to be in 5th grade. And yeah, I've never seen a lesson plan come home this is how you pursue a fulfilling and enriching life, which is, I remember my parents didn't ask me too much, hey, what do you want to do for a living? And I'll ask my kids occasionally just to get their temperature, but my response is, you know what, take your time. Because they'll say, I don't know. I'm like, you know what? Neither do I. I'm 40. I'll let you know if I figure out a formula. You got all the time in the world, but just find something to do that you love to do.
Totally. And you never, when you hear about these horrific acts that have been happening.
Man, that's another rabbit hole.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole at all. But it's never like, Joe Blow just got done from a 3-day backpack trip and came in and grabbed, and did this horrific act, or, went surfing or snowboarding, and then on his way home from the mountain went and did this horrific act. And then that's where the Church of the 7-Day Recreationalist is like, hey man, you come to the church, man, you'll be way happier.
I find for myself that anytime I don't think I've ever been lost in the woods, because unfortunately it was hammered into my head never to be lost. But as close as I can get to losing myself in the woods is more who I find out who I am.
Right.
The harder I push, I mean, it was ingrained in me. Super young, and I think if we ingrained it, like my kids are crazy active. 4 seasons, I got my daughters riding horses. We're on the lake doing lake stuff. My boys are already like, hey, Dad, did you get the season pass? I'm like, just chill out. I'll get the season pass, right? It's not on sale yet. Just take it easy. I think if more people did those type of things, there'd be more inherent appreciation and then desire to understand what is going on in the climate. Because you've seen it more than most people. And even in Montana where I live now, I'm not going to say I understand where the climate deniers are coming from, but I can see where they'll use it. Like, hey, man, we got 410 inches of snow.
Right.
And and it rained for like the last 2 months straight, and look how green everything is. But it's like, yeah, that we're a little microsystem.
Well, you're also like really curbing the everything for, you can like the perspective on things. Because if you really peel back the layers of, we work with a fish guide who's like, the rivers now, they used to never close. Now they close because they're getting too warm.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't fish. They're losing kind of a key part of their season, which is middle of August to September, is now largely off the records. The forest fires. And then also how much it's snowing at, where those snow levels are. The frost, I guess the pine bark beetle is a great example. Montana's losing millions of trees, and that's due to warming of winters. And it
has something to do with normally a healthy tree will push it out with the sap, right? But at a certain temperature, I might be totally wrong.
So we need a certain amount of really cold days to kill the beetle. And we're just not getting those long cold stretches.
Yeah, because you can see sections of forest that are just
So so Montana, which I'm sure your wife is there going, it is cold, and you're like, well, actually, historically, it was like 20 below for 40 days of winter, and that cold snap is what would kill the beetle, and those big cold stretches are not happening. So again, you point to nature. Nature in Montana is screaming climate change. The trees are, the fish are, the animals are, and so that's.
Well, my brother-in-law and sister were just up in Glacier. We can see the opening to Glacier National Park from our house, and they said
the glaciers are.
So, and that's what I was going to go to. My brother-in-law said he was reading a sign that if by 2020 they think the glaciers might be gone in Glacier National Park.
Totally.
Which I guess then it'll just be National Park, but.
And then to add to your climate denier buddies, they'll go, well, glaciers are always receding, but which is true. They're growing or receding. But the rate of this receding is unprecedented.
Yeah, It's a long topic to wrap your head around for sure.
Totally.
No, it's all right.
I guess in closing on my deal, the last point that I would like to make is that, again, from a climate perspective, this last election went the way that it did off of 50,000 votes in 7 key districts.
Wow.
We're not in the Clean Power Plan is gone. Paris Agreement's gone. So these major things in America where we took this left turn is gone off of a very small amount of votes. So every vote matters. And
that's another one I hear often. It's like, what does my vote mean? I didn't realize the margin was 50,000. I mean,
if you peel back exactly what state and what it took in those states, incredibly tight.
Microscopic in comparison to the whole.
Microscopic, and then 70% of Americans are concerned on climate change. It's just, again, it's not a key issue. And for the Republicans that are listening to this, start putting your Republicans' feet against the fire and get them to answer the hard questions on climate change, and ideally get them to be a climate champion. And I am an eternal optimist, and one example of optimism we are seeing on Capitol Hill is we have this bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus where you can only join if it's a Republican and a Democrat joined together.
Oh, interesting.
Now, every Democrat would be on there, but you can't find the Republicans to go on. But with that, there is, I think there's currently 32 Republicans that are in the bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus. So, 4 years ago, there were 0.
That's improvement right there.
So if you're a Republican, write your senator, write your congressman, and care about climate change. Get them on that, because that's a major step for us.
I dig it. One final question. You ready to shift gears?
Yes.
This one's from the brother-in-law. What influence did Craig Kelly have on your riding style?
Oh, God, we could have done a whole podcast on Craig.
So Jason, my brother-in-law, he rips on a board. Like you said, he's pissed that I'm here. So, Jason, I hope you hear this and you're even more pissed.
Nice,
but I'm getting the question in for him. He gets the closing question.
Well, just the mention of Craig, makes my, palms sweat and, sends spine tingle down. Makes my spine tingle. But Craig is he was a huge. I think he was the compass of snowboarding for a long time, and when he passed away, the sport really lost its way. And to sum up what Craig did, he was a world champ. Then at the peak of his career, stopped competing, started focusing on free riding. That was a radical idea. At the peak of that, said, I'm done with riding in front of cameras. Now I'm going to become a mountain guide, and my goal is to take everyday snowboarders and show them the best day of their life.
Wow.
And he passed away in an avalanche, trying to be the first Splitboard approved mountain guide in North America and maybe the world. But yeah, his influence is significant. As you saw in Life of Glide, the last film I did, I dedicated to Craig.
I'm going to put links on the iTunes things to the film as well, because it'll give a lot of context to what we're talking about. I have another question because it just triggered my memory. Avalanches. Terrified of them. Never been in one.
Should be. Yeah.
Have you been in an avalanche?
I've definitely been in some avalanches. I've never been in it's kind of hard to explain, but we'll be in certain situations where it's totally where the snowpack is very safe. Then it will snow, say, 6 inches on top of a safe snowpack. So we'll go out and we realize that those top 6 inches are easy to start an avalanche with, the top 6 inches. So we go to small, imagine a small chute with a clean out run. Like at times we will go and mess around with these really small avalanches, which you should never do at home. And I actually really don't do that anymore because I feel like it kind of glorifies avalanches. But I've never been in a situation where we were really concerned about big avalanches and then had one start. When that happens, when the avalanche danger goes to high, I sleep great at night because I know I'm not getting into avalanche terrain. Where I don't sleep well at night is when the avalanche danger is moderate and it's totally stable, and I know that I have an opportunity to ride a really serious line in perfect conditions, or what we call spooky moderate, which is what killed Craig Kelly, where it's unlikely for an avalanche to happen, but if one happens, it's going to be catastrophic. And that stuff, that's when it's time to grab your surfboard and go on vacation.
Go elsewhere. What would you say the number one killer is in the backcountry?
Spooky moderate, avalanche terrain, and cornices. But meaning the high avalanche terrain, there's enough information out there if you're getting caught in an avalanche, because the avalanche forecasting is incredible.
Josh was showing me some of that stuff.
Yeah,
websites.
Where if you're in a populated area, there's people going out every day and evaluating the snowpack. So as long as you're, this deep instability in the snowpack that you'll get in Montana and Colorado, which is complex, meaning, that's where they unlikely for an avalanche to happen. But if it happens, it's huge. But in general, it's like you learn how to read that avalanche report, and you can learn a ton of information. And there's no reason to be caught in these major avalanches on a high avalanche day.
Yeah, there was somebody killed in what I wouldn't even call it a major, but they think was an avalanche just off the big mountain. Has access to some trailhead stuff. I did just a little bit, and they found a body. They couldn't find it because there was a huge dump afterwards. They found it as it thawed right under where this guy was kind of taking me through for my first backcountry stuff near the resort. I would have never guessed it would have slid there where they found him.
Right.
This was like, okay, I know absolutely
that
nothing.
That means it was probably extreme avalanche danger, which then makes really mellow terrain really, at that point you don't need much to kill someone.
Sounds like a resort day on those days.
Definite resort day.
We have to get you up there to the resort.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, you
won't believe these greens. You're gonna rip them. And
I think they call them snow goats. The trees that are all covered in white.
Oh man,
Those are really unique. That's like some of the only, definitely in North America.
You guys don't get those down here?
We don't get. We'll get a little bit of it, but
I have a few good pictures I need to send you then with your board right in front of it, just a massive. Because those are all at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, those are beautiful.
Yeah, they're not fun when you hit them.
No.
Tomahawking.
They look all soft and fluffy, but it's really just a metal pole sitting there.
I don't know how many videos I have of just white, blue, and then you hear because my kids just roll up and I'm sitting there. I'm laughing too because, like I said, I just say a drunk driver and go with it. And once I go over once, I don't know what's up and down. But yeah, that's the journey I've been on. Dude, thank you for your time, man. It was so cool to see that video, start up, watching you from a distance on social media, the generosity to invite me here and sit down and talk about this stuff. I can't thank you enough, man.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for your service.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Most of it. All right.
Cheers.
That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I guess that's it for this week. What is new? Last week, we launched Free Range American. That is probably what is the newest aspect of my life. And go to freerangeamerican.us and check it out for yourself. It is a brand that celebrates the freedoms we are so incredibly fortunate and privileged and lucky to have. I dislike people who talk about being free but don't exercise it at all. Not going to necessarily judge them, but I really wish that it was the exact opposite. They exercise their freedom and they talked about it a little bit less. The mission statement for the brand is simple. Do awesome shit. That's it. You can do that in the water. Whatever form the water may take. Maybe it falls from the sky in little flakes. Maybe you're surfing 1-foot waves or 50-foot waves, but you're out there, you're pushing the limits. Maybe you're climbing rocks. Maybe you're jumping off the rocks. Maybe you're an athlete, regardless of what kind you are. Maybe you're on a motorbike. Maybe you play hockey, lacrosse, fill in the blank. Any ball, bat, or stick sport, come get some. Maybe you don't do any of those things, but you just like being outside. You like hiking, you like camping. You know what? Everybody is welcome and invited to hop on board this brand, because the best thing about the brand is it's not about me and it's not about Dudley. It is about the people who agree with the mission statement of do awesome shit, and the statement that freedom is valueless and meaningless unless you use it. So check it out, freerangeamerican.us. .com didn't really make sense for that particular domain name. And I think, let me see, this comes out on Monday. By the end of this week, if you're listening to this on the release day or the release week, by Friday, the women's apparel should be landing. And let's be honest, no guy is out there doing awesome shit without the support of a pretty killer woman as well. Unless you're, like, creepy, down by the river in a van by yourself. And if you're that guy, don't be that guy. Also, please don't buy a shirt. And that's all I have for this week. Thank you for the support. Thanks for the emails. With the Free Range America thing, before I forget, we are looking at doing a coast-to-coast tour sometime next year. I have no idea when it's going to be, but we want to hit military bases, essentially starting in San Diego. I know one destination point will be Fort Bragg, which is where Dudley was born, and then anywhere along the way as well. So I've had a bunch of people reach out, but please continue to do so. I'm going to start getting back and actually throwing some pins on the board to see if we can put a skeleton to this thing. And that is it. I've talked your ear off enough for 1 week. See you next week.